Hey there, my name's Curtis Lucas, and you're watching Empire Building. In this episode, I need to address what's happening as I'm recording this in the United States Senate, where they're discussing passing, at least onto the House, a infrastructure bill with some very important and critical regulation decisions regarding cryptocurrencies. And it's caused quite a stir. And I also find that there is an awful lot of misunderstanding on exactly what is the issue here. And also, the wording of the bill itself only highlights exactly how much or exactly the level of misunderstanding that there is within these regulatory agencies. If it passes the way it is right now, could have damaging effects on the ability for certain companies to innovate in the United States within this technology, and could drive innovators overseas or offshore to other countries. We're going to actually dig into exactly what the bill states and why this is so important. Now, I don't want to set off anyone's inner rage demon again, but there is something that I read that was put out by the Washington Post that I just cannot let stand. This article, Cryptocurrency Brawl Bogs Down Infrastructure Bill as Yellen and White House Fight Changes. Senators are at odds over how to handle taxation related to cryptocurrencies, setting off a fierce lobbying war. Just be prepared. This is going to be somewhat infuriating to listen to. The Biden administration is pushing back against a last-minute effort by a bipartisan group of senators to limit a proposal in the infrastructure bill to increase federal regulation of cryptocurrencies. The fierce lobbying push helped stall plans to finish voting on the bill Thursday night. And now it appears debate will stretch into the weekend. Oh, no, not the weekend. Treasury Secretary Janet L. Yellen spoke with lawmakers Thursday to raise objections to the effort led by Senate Finance Committee Chair Ron Wyden, Democrat, and to Republican senators to weaken the legislation's proposed cryptocurrency overhauls. Last month, the White House and Senator Rob Portman agreed to a proposal to require increased tax compliance for cryptocurrency brokers as a way to help pay for the bipartisan infrastructure bill. The deal came under intense criticism for cryptocurrency investors who have argued it would give the Biden administration sweeping powers to virtually cripple the growing field of cryptocurrencies. Now, it's ironic that the thing that people are actually taking issue in this bill is the vague nature of those definitions, followed by this infuriating article that further vaguely defines what the actual issue is. They seem to be insinuating that this bipartisan group are lobbying to weaken this bill's effectiveness to regulate cryptocurrencies for tax purposes. And for an outsider who has no idea how cryptocurrencies work, that's the only conclusion you could be led to make after reading something like this. And it gets better or worse, depending on how you look at it. Some senators had hoped to pass the bipartisan bill on Thursday night, but the debate bogged down by the cryptocurrency fight remained one of the unresolved issues. On Thursday night, as the impasse between Wyden and the White House appeared to deepen, Portman and Senator Mark R. Warren, Democrat, offered a competing amendment as a potential compromise. The Warren-Portman measure would exempt more cryptocurrency actors from greater regulation than the initial proposal, but fewer than Wyden, Toomey, and Lumens want. The White House said publicly late Thursday it is supporting the Portman-Warner effort as it would do less to limit the executive branch's new authorities over cryptocurrencies. So yet again, they make it sound like they're fighting to somehow limit power over these cryptocurrencies, when that's not at all what they're attempting to accomplish. Now, I don't really know if the intent here by articles such as this is literally intended to mislead people? Or is it that the people who write these articles literally just don't understand it themselves? It really could be either at this point. And the same goes for the actual senators who are crafting these bills in the first place. This is what it all boils down to. This definition under information reporting for brokers and digital assets. The definition of a broker is what all of this is stemming from. Who is a broker? What they're basically saying is in this new bill, they'll introduce requirements that brokers must submit information on anyone who they facilitate transactions for, so that the IRS would be able to pursue would-be tax evaders, people who cash in their cryptocurrencies and don't pay tax on their gains. This is one of the means in which they want to pursue to help pay for this sweeping infrastructure bill. Now, nobody in this bipartisan lobbying group is trying to stop the government from being able to go after those tax evaders. What they're trying to do is simply accurately define what a broker would be in cryptocurrencies. Because the fact of the matter is, you can't just define everything in cryptocurrencies the same way you would a centralized system like the banking world. A broker in the banking world would be somebody like a stockbroker and so forth. Those entities would need to report with all the information from their customers to the IRS. So if any of those people chose not to file their gains and pay taxes on them appropriately, the IRS can go after them. So the issue is, how are they defining a broker? Down in paragraph D, it defines it as any person who, for consideration, is responsible for regularly providing any service effectuating transfers of digital assets on behalf of another person. Now, this could mean a lot of people. You'll notice it doesn't say any entity or corporation. It says any person. Well, in a decentralized system, that's a lot of people, myself included. I run a staking node. As a miner, I also facilitate transactions of other people on the blockchain. I don't know who these people are. There's no possible way for me to know who they are. I don't store any of that information. It's not possible. That's the whole point. That is the entire system that we've been trying to build all this time. But it goes much further than that, because by effectuating a bill like this and putting it into law, the problem is the good actors out there who are trying to comply, if there's a risk that because of this new wording, they could be defined as a broker, but are unable to comply because they don't store or collect any of the information by design, then the risk of operating within the United States borders becomes too great. But luckily, in this technology, which doesn't recognize borders, those organizations, those companies, can just relocate to other countries around the world, set up shop, deploy their products and services where the regulatory environment is more frictionless and better informed. Places that don't rush in to enact these types of hasty bills. Because the reality is, most people were caught off guard that cryptocurrency even ended up in this infrastructure bill. It seemed to come out of nowhere. So how much thought did they even put into this? And the remarkable part about this is this section was actually put forward by the Treasury Department itself. This suggests that the Treasury Department doesn't understand how this technology works. Now, me personally, obviously I'm not concerned. I'm not an American. I'm a Canadian. And in Canada, our laws and the regulations that have been passed are a whole lot better informed than what we have been seeing come out of the US. We are also much further ahead. As I've pointed out before, in Canada, we now have at least 3, maybe even 4 Bitcoin ETFs and at least 1, possibly 3 by now. I haven't looked into it any further, but Ethereum ETFs even. And the other amendment that they had been referring to that, well, as they put it, would exempt more cryptocurrency actors from greater regulation than the initial proposal, but fewer than Wyden, Toomey, and Lumens want. What they're referring to is they've altered the definition slightly to make sure that they have accounted for the fact that minors would not be included in this. But that's as far as they were willing to go. What exactly did Toomey and Lumens want? Well, they made that very open and public. The actual wording of the alternative amendment, as far as I can tell, has never been released. I couldn't find it anywhere. But we're told the wording suggests that minors would be exempt from this. So this would have no impact on Bitcoin itself. But DeFi and staking, very different situation. So what Wyden, Toomey, and Lumens wanted was, as was shared on Twitter, this definition, which would be something that would exempt as well validating distributed ledger transactions, proof of stake, selling hardware or software for which the sole function is to permit a person to control private keys which are used for accessing digital assets on a distributed ledger. They're talking about wallets, both hardware and software wallets. Those developers, you don't want them to have to be able to be forced to comply with disclosing that kind of information because they don't collect it by design. And C, developing digital assets or their corresponding protocols for use by other persons, provided that such other persons are not customers of the person developing such assets or protocols. So again, these are referring to open source developers that are designing these protocols, whether that be on Bitcoin or any other cryptocurrency. So what this bipartisan lobbying group is attempting to accomplish is to better define what a broker is, so that good actors, companies that are attempting to innovate in this space, can do so at will within United States borders. If they're at risk of being defined in such a manner and then unable to comply, well, then they're putting themselves at risk. And why bother doing that? Not to mention, you are just increasing friction in this space. So no, they're not trying to weaken the bill. They're trying to make the bill effective. If you can't define what something is properly, then how are you meant to affect anything? And the unintended consequences, those innovators leave your shores. It's got nothing to do with weakening the bill and allowing cryptocurrency actors to somehow evade taxes. So on this note, in Canada, as I mentioned, things are somewhat more straightforward. We have a lot more regulatory clarity over what digital assets are and what they're not. And the regulators are a lot more informed with the nuances of this technology. So you may be asking, why is that? What is it about Canada that had them so much better prepared for this? Well, as it turns out, way back in 2014, we're talking 7 years ago, the Canadian Senate went through great lengths to educate their members on this new technology so that they could properly regulate this space without stifling that innovation. This was a great concern of theirs. They somehow recognized, or at least some of them recognized, that this was something they had to get right the first time. It was important that they didn't mess this up. So they reached out to the industry and asked, who would be the best person to bring to the Senate to educate their members? And everyone they spoke to mentioned one name. You may recognize this person.
If Canada would move forward and put some regulation, as some witnesses have asked of us, and that the world did not follow, the G7 countries did not follow in similar regulation, what would be the pros and cons of such a move?
Well, that's very interesting because already we see tremendous regulatory fragmentation. we have a regulator in New York State that has taken initiative to do regulation based on New York State law, regulation that looks very, very similar to traditional banking regulation and is not very well suited for Bitcoin. And simultaneously, there will be other forms of regulation. So in the United States, we're likely to end up with a patchwork of state, local, and federal regulation. And I think you're going to see similar attempts in many countries. Bitcoin technology is such that it can operate across borders very, very effectively. And therefore, Bitcoin companies can migrate to the area of least friction and can create the jobs and the innovation and the growth in the places where regulation is best informed about the nuances and particular needs of Bitcoin companies. So I think Canada and other countries that are looking at this regulation very carefully rather than rushing into it have an opportunity to create an environment that is very friendly to those companies and attract one of the industries that, quite frankly, is creating thousands of jobs today, which cannot be said for too many other industries.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
So there you have it. A lot can be said when you take the time to educate yourself. And governments are now having to go through this process themselves. It is fortunate to hear that at least there are some within those ranks that do understand this well enough to educate their colleagues, provided their colleagues are even bothered to listen. It was reassuring to see that this group was a bipartisan group of both Republicans and Democrats, which just goes to show Bitcoin is not a political thing. It's for everybody. So there's no reason why both sides can't get behind it. And I have a hard time imagining that this could possibly end up as something that one party will get behind and not the other. I mean, for myself, just reading my own comment section, it's clear to me that we've got both camps in this space. They may not be able to agree on everything else, but when it comes to Bitcoin, interests get aligned. And even within, never mind just Bitcoin, but within cryptocurrencies, what I find is when something like this happens, everybody throws all their other differences aside and come together against this common threat. Andreas has mentioned this many times, that the true enemy is centralized, corrupt institutions.
And at that point, we are suddenly going to have a kumbaya moment, when suddenly we will all reunite in brotherhood around our own weirdness and realize once again that there is an enemy here, that there is a parasitic system that dominates the lives of 99% of the human population, and that we just want to do something different and have a choice. And for that, we will be ostracized and called names, and terrorists, drug dealers, pedophiles, pornographers in this room who are all using the anonymous dark web money, they're not going to discriminate. We will come together. We will see moments of coalition when we are attacked, just like any population. It's like, if you want world peace, hope for aliens. That's the only way.
It's certainly something that I've been seeing an awful lot of lately. Don't know, maybe it's because Ethereum has been making a whole lot of moves, and this London hard fork that was just launched, a lot of people seem to hate on Ethereum, referring to it as a scam and wishing it to fail. This makes no sense to me, especially when that's coming from within the same general framework of ideas.
Because to all of the people outside, we're just the block weirdos, right? And you sit down with someone and they say, oh, I heard you're involved in blockchain. What do you do? And you're like, well, I'm involved in Ethereum Classic, which, of course, as you know, is the one that maintains the immutability principle after the reentrancy bug of the DAO. And now we're committed to maintaining proof of work because, after all, we all know that proof of stake and the nothing at stake problem, as expressed in Casper the Friendly Ghost, will collapse the entire heretical cryptocurrency that calls itself Ethereum. And your friend is like, is that a blockchain? Yeah, it's a blockchain. but the right one. I'm not going to play those games.
Ethereum has an enormous amount of potential if it's given the opportunity to continue. And considering, despite what anybody else says, it is decentralized, you can't shut it down. No different than you can shut down Bitcoin. Governments will not be able to cancel Ethereum. Now, how effective will it be in the long run? It maybe does remain to be seen. But with so many people working on it from all around the world, it seems to me that that success is inevitable. Not to suggest that it's not possible for some other smart contract platform to somehow overtake Ethereum. I personally do think that's unlikely, since mainly what this game is all about is network effect. That's why me personally, I don't spend a whole lot of time studying the first 100 or 200 coins by market cap, trying to understand every single one that might be the next Bitcoin killer or Ethereum killer or whatever. As far as I'm concerned, the die has been cast. It's Bitcoin and Ethereum, and those two are going to be like wingmen. The innovation and development that's going to merge Bitcoin and Ethereum will create a financial system, a financial base layer that literally anything could be built on top of. I personally believe that the two complement each other wonderfully, and as time goes on, my hope is that people will start to understand that they don't compete with one another and there's no reason to hate on the other. They need each other. The trade-offs that Ethereum has made in order to provide smart contracts and that level of innovation is something that Bitcoin just cannot do without sacrificing what it already has. And that is sound money with rock hard immutability. I think that Ethereum, especially when it does go to full proof of stake, may need to tap into that immutability layer of Bitcoin in order to secure itself. And I think these developments will eventually come to be realized. But it's also pretty clear to me that all this will be happening basically right in the open, and yet all of these lawmakers will still have no idea. It's pretty clear that this space, the development, will accelerate. Meanwhile, the understanding of lawmakers and regulators will always lag many generations behind. But those countries that do take the time to educate themselves will only attract more of these innovators to their shores. I'm just glad that I'm personally lucky enough to reside in a country that does seem, at least for now, to appreciate those nuances and attempt to regulate them responsibly. Now we'll see if this vote actually proceeds to get passed today. If not, probably within the next week. But it'll be very interesting to see how this all washes out. But that's all I got for this one. Now let's get back to empire building.